So today I want to address something that I hope that I would never find the need to do so. I wanted to avoid it. I don't like talking about it. It's unmentionable, but unfortunately, for the purposes of exposing the workers of darkness, I have no choice. Anyone who has read the news lately has heard about what happened in Pennsylvania. I will go to an article in Fortune magazine. And the title is Priest Produced Child Pornography on Church Property, Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report States. This article is by Glenn Fleischman. Now, folks, I want you to pay attention to the names of the exposers and how Jewish they are, the ones who did the exposing of these heinous crimes. This is by Glenn Fleischman. That's a Jewish name. August 14, 2018. Among the horrific revelations of a 1,356-page Pennsylvania grand jury report finds that more than 1,000 identifiable child victims were abused by over 300 Catholic priests. One stands out starkly. Priests allegedly used church property to produce child pornography. With one priest, George Zierwas, the grand jury says his diocese knew of complaints starting in 1987 and that he purportedly sexually abused children. Zierwas was shuffled among positions until he was placed on personal leave in 1995, which lasted until he was murdered in Havana, Cuba in May 2001. The report claims Zierwas and three other priests created child pornography in parishes and rectories using whips, violence, and sadism while raping their victims. The three other priests were later charged in 1988 with sexual assault of two altar boys, one pleading guilty and the other found guilty, and both sentenced to years in prison. The third evaded charges due to a statute of limitations expiration. In another case, a priest admitted in testimony before the grand jury that he had seen photos in 1980 of another priest, David Soderlund, sexually abusing a 12-year-old boy and reported it to his superiors. Soderlund was removed briefly from the ministry, then returned for several years until he was put on administrative leave in 1989. Soderlund was dismissed until 2005. According to the grand jury report, diocese records state that the church negotiated with law enforcement to avoid prosecution. Soderlund was arrested, convicted, and sentenced for possession of sexual exploitation of children and possession of child pornography in 2009 in Wyoming. A number of priests cited in the report were found by church and civil authorities in possession of child pornography as well. In 2004, a priest ordained in 1974, Ronald Yarosh, was found with tremendous amount of child pornography. He pleaded guilty to possession and an unrelated act of embezzlement, but the church didn't expel him until 2007 after subsequent parole violation led him back to prison. In 1981, Erie Diocese priest Robert F. Bauer was found to have collected child pornography but one of the 4 diocesan workers who reported it to a priest in church was fired. She, the priest's secretary, and another co-worker retained the material in case it would be used in the future. When Bauer was charged with possession of child pornography, the woman took the material to the police, but the material was destroyed without additional charges being filed. The original charges against the priest were dropped because of mishandling of evidence. The grand jury report issued its findings based on 2 years of examination of approximately 500,000 pages of documents from Catholic regions known as dioceses that cover 54 of 67 counties in Pennsylvania, as well as a testimony of dozens of witnesses. The report's statement derived from what were often secret church records as well as witnesses, and over a dozen priests accused, most of whom admitted their abuse. Most of the alleged crimes have exceeded statutes of limitations to bring charges. The U.S. Catholic Church has spent and committed to spending nearly $4 billion in settlements and court awards related to sexual abuse cases involving priests and other church officials over the last 65 years, according to a 2014 report. Most of those payments came in recent years. Some dioceses have filed for bankruptcy protection, however, and avoided paying some of these judgments. Now, I will go to the AP, and we're going to get a little closer to the truth here. The title of this particular article is Weaponization of Faith. Weaponization of faith. Sound familiar? Examples of clergy abuse report. This is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a landmark grand jury report on clergy abuse in 6 Roman Catholic dioceses in Pennsylvania detailed how priests often use religious rituals, symbols of faith, and the threat of eternity in hell to groom, molest, and rape children. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro. Oh, yes, you heard it right. Josh Shapiro, another Jew, well, I should say a Jew, prosecuting this particular case. He called it the weaponization of faith, and rightly so. Some examples cited in the report released Tuesday of how over 300 predator priests dating back to the 1940s used the children's own religious faith and trust in them as religious leaders to victimize and silence them. Confessions and crosses. One priest tied up a victim with a rope in a confessional in a praying position. When the victim refused to perform sex, the angered priest used a 7-inch crucifix to sexually assault him. Another victim said a priest used a metal cross to beat him. At a parish rectory, 4 priests made a boy strip and pose as Jesus in the cross while they took photos. He stated that all of them giggled and stated that the pictures would be used as a reference for new religious statues for the parishes, the grand jury wrote. 2 of the priests later did jail time for sexually assaulting 2 altar boys. One priest told a boy he was fondling that it was okay because the priest was an instrument of God. Another was quoted as telling altar boys they should serve naked beneath their cassocks because God did not want any man-made clothes to be worn next to their skin during Mass, the jury wrote. When a bishop asked the Vatican to remove a priest who used physical force and threats to abuse children, the bishop noted the priest invoked the name of God to justify his actions against his victims while using their faith and the priesthood to manipulate them and secure their silence. Parishioners were never told why he was removed in 2006. the next point. Heaven and damnation. Threats of eternal damnation were not uncommon, the grand jury found. Priests told children they would go to hell if they told anyone what happened, and nobody would believe a lying child over a man of God's work. In one church, a priest told a boy who confided he had been gang raped as a 7-year-old and that he had to provide sex to get to heaven. He would then be molested for 3 years before the priest was transferred. The next point, privacy in the church. Predator priests used any opportunity they could to molest children while they had them alone, taking advantage of privacy of church facilities. Several priests used hypnosis during counseling sessions to manipulate their victims. Helping a priest grade papers in his rectory somehow became a session of nude weightlifting. One boy was abused when he went to collect his report card from school. Next point, reaction to the findings. Predators in every diocese weaponized the Catholic faith and used it as a tool of their abuse, the Attorney General said. While exposing sorrow over what happened, church leaders said the most offensive occurred sometime in the past, and note that major reforms were adopted starting in 2002 to safeguard children. Terrence McKiernan, president of the watchdog group bishopaccountability.org, said the ritualization of abuse was a fundamental part of how children were sexually exploited. Even when the Catholic rituals and doctrines are not specifically mobilized by the priest, they are in play. The grand jurors pointedly wrote that the investigation was not an attack on the faith, noting that many are Catholics themselves. People of all faiths and of no faith want their children to be safe, the grand jurors wrote, but we were presented with a conspicuous concentration of child sex abuse cases that have come from the church. All right, the final point, outcome of investigation. Because of time limits on the prosecution of old cases, only 2 of the priests have been charged with crimes as a result of the grand jury investigation. Though a number were prosecuted in years past, over 100 have died and many others have retired. Yes, they got away with it. Shapiro said the investigation is continuing. His office got more than 150 calls and emails within a day of the report's release from other people with stories of abuse. I need to go to the Bible in the book of Kings, and also in the words of Paul in Romans 1. First Kings 14. We'll start in verse 21. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. This is when the kingdom of Israel was divided in two. Jeroboam took 10 tribes, and Rehoboam, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, and some Levites later came back. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Jehovah did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah. and Ammonitis. And Judah did evil in the sight of Jehovah, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins which they had committed above all that their fathers had done. Yes, much worse than what was done with the golden calf. For they also built unto them high places, and graven images, and groves on every high hill and under every green tree, and it should be rendered as under every evergreen tree. And there were Sodomites in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which Jehovah had cast out before the children of Israel. Now, when we read this, Sodomites, let us go to Strong's Concordance. Let us get a little bit of context here. Kodesh. This is 6945, Strong's Concordance, Hebrew Dictionary. Temple prostitutes. So these were Sodomite men who, as it says right here, male cult prostitutes. It's starting to sound familiar, isn't it? Worse than what the children of Israel did with the golden calf. And you must remember that Jehovah, the Holy One of Israel, said that generation would not enter into the land of his rest. They were rejected. And what the generation of Rehoboam did was far worse. All right. So, let's go to First Kings 5 and verse 12. Verse 9, and in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, reigned Asa over Judah. 41 years he reigned in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maachah, the daughter of Abishalom. Yeah, his mother was a Jew, not an Ammonite. Verse 11, and Asa did that which was right in the eyes of Jehovah, just like David his father. And he took away the Sodomites out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. And also Maachah his mother, even he removed her from being queen because she had made an idol in a grove. Even she was corrupted. And so he made an example out of her. And Asa destroyed her idol and burned it by the brook in Kidron. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, Asa's heart was perfect with Jehovah all his days, and he brought into the things which his father had dedicated and the things which himself had dedicated into the house of Jehovah, silver, gold, and vessels. All right. Now, There's a whole lot of scriptures that I need to go through here concerning this. I will go ahead and go with Romans 1, like I said before. Well, let me see. Now, I want to go ahead, first of all, I want to, let's do this. Let's go to 1 Timothy 10, verse 1. Oh, 1 and verse 10, I'm sorry. First Timothy 1. Verse 3. As I besought you, speaking to Timothy, to stay at Ephesus when I went to Macedonia, that you might charge some of them that teach no other doctrine. In other words, that Timothy would stay there and remind those people that they will teach no other doctrine, neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies which minister questions rather than the purification, edification which is in faith, so do. Now the end of the commandment is charity, of a pure heart and of a good conscience and of faith unfeigned, from which some, having swerved, have turned aside unto vain jangling, desire to be teachers of the law, understanding neither what they say nor whereof they affirm. Verse 8, but we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully, knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but the lawless and the disobedient, for the ungodly and the sinners, for the unholy and the profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, yes, sodomites, for men stealers, for liars, for perjurers, and for any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine, according to the glorious gospel of the blessed Jehovah, which was committed to my trust. All right. Let's go now to First Corinthians 6, verse 9. Once again, the words of Paul. Why in the world is Paul having to ask this question? Don't you know that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Jehovah? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, aka sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom. And such some of you used to be, but you are now washed and now sanctified, and you are justified in the name of not Lord Jesus, no, Messiah Yehoshua, by the Spirit of our Father in heaven. Okay. Let's now go to Romans 1. Verse 18. For the wrath of Jehovah, our Father in heaven, is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. How do they hold the truth in unrighteousness? Well, they exchange the name of Yehoshua for Jesus. They exchange the Sabbath for Sunday. They exchanged the Hebrew holy days for pagan holidays. They exchanged the cup of the Messiah for the cup of demons. The demon specifically being the child of Zeus. And so, verse 19, because that which may be known of Jehovah our Father in heaven is manifest in them, for Jehovah has clearly showed it to them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and, as it says here, Godhead, that they are without excuse. So nobody can be excused for unbelief. Because that, when they knew him, when they knew the Father, they did not glorify him as our Father in heaven, neither were they thankful. Yes, because they would glorify themselves and call themselves the Holy Father, you see. But were vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and they changed the glory of the uncorruptible Jehovah and they exchanged it for an image made like a corruptible man. And in every single Christian house of worship, with the exception of maybe the Amish and a few others, other than that, in every single one of these houses of worship, they have the graven images of a corruptible man. Exactly as Paul warned would happen. And also birds and four-footed beasts, yes, little dragons too, and gargoyles and creeping things. For this reason, Jehovah gave them up, forsook them, left them to their own uncleanness, through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Yes, just like the Sodomites, the temple Sodomites in the days of the unrighteous kings of Israel. They changed the truth of our Father in heaven into a lie. Yes, they changed the gospel. They perverted the gospel exactly as Paul warned about. Like he warned the Corinthians, like he warned the Galatians. And now he talks about it to the Romans. He's forecasting this was going to happen. He's essentially prophesying. They turn the truth of Jehovah into a lie. Supersessionism, otherwise known as replacement theology, claiming that somehow the church replaces Israel, when the only way to get into the kingdom is through one of the gates of the tribes of Israel. There is no other way. They changed the truth. They changed the gospel into a lie. They have taught you a false gospel, telling you that eternal life is in heaven. And then they threaten these children that they're going to burn forever in hell and never go to heaven unless they do these unspeakable crimes against our Father in heaven. And worship the creature more than their Creator, who is blessed forever. Because of this, Jehovah, our Father in heaven, gave them up to uncleanness through the lust in their own hearts. Yes, he rejected them. Giving up means rejecting them. To dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Oh, I just read that. For this cause, verse 26, Jehovah gave them up unto vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burn in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that reward of their error which is necessary. Even as they did not like to retain Jehovah in their knowledge, he gave them up over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient, because they are filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetous, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of Jehovah, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, and disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable and unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of Jehovah that's coming, that they which commit these things are worthy of death, not only do the same, they also have pleasure in them, the others who do it. I suspect that there's going to come a time when YouTube is going to throw me off of their site for teaching the truth, but I will continue. Now let's look at 2 Peter 2 and verse 6. Why is Peter having to talk about this? Right. We'll start in 2 Peter 2 and verse 1. But there are false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who will privately bring in damnable heresies, even denying the one who bought them. Yes, exchanging. It's just like, how do I put this? When the people of Israel had Aaron make them a golden calf, the two golden calves, they said, "These are the gods who brought us out of the land of Israel." In such a way, so has the church rejected the one who bought them, and they replaced him with Jesus in order to honor Zeus, and bring upon themselves swift destruction, and many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of the way the truth is going to be evil spoken of. And through covetousness they shall with vain words make merchandise of you, not only you, but your children. And they did, and they still do. And their judgment, now of a long time, will not linger. And their damnation does not slumber. For if Jehovah spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into the chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment day, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, the preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemning them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that afterward should live ungodly. And he delivered righteous Lot, who was vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, for that righteous man, dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Jehovah knows how to deliver the honorable, the decent, the upright, the righteous out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness. Now you know who they are. And if you continue to follow them, you will reap their reward. I will continue. And despise governance. Presumptuous they are, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of, it says, dignities. But let's go look in Strong's Concordance. It is doxa 1391 in the Greek dictionary, and it is honor. Honor of, how is it? It says divine quality, the unspoken manifestation of our Father in heaven. This is not about kings. No. This is, they speak evil of the decency and the honor of our Father in heaven. And this is what they do. So now you have context for the next verse. Whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusation against them before Jehovah. But these, as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of things they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption, and shall receive the reward of the unrighteousness, as they count it pleasure to, it says riot, but that's not what it says in Greek. Trouphe, pleasure and softness, daintiness, and luxuriousness. Yes, these priests and these preachers, that's how they live. In daintiness, softness, and luxuriousness. Wearing fine clothes, living sumptuously at the expense of the people who they make merchandise out of. Don't you see how the translators love to conveniently mistranslate the words of the apostles and the prophets? This is why you should be very, very careful in your reading, and don't let the translators deprive you of the truth. They count it pleasure to softness, daintiness, luxuriousness today. They are spots and blemishes, disgrace. They revel in their own deceivings while they feast with you. Having eyes full of adultery, they cannot cease from sin. They lure unstable souls. They lure children. These filthy, vile priests, whom the people give their money to. A heart they have exercised with covetous practices, a curse. It says cursed children, but that can also be translated as a curse children. They have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Bozor, who preferred the wages of unrighteousness hoping to get a pile of money to curse Israel. But he was rebuked for his iniquity. And isn't it true that this is what the priests and the preachers do? They get a pile of money, live daintily and softly for cursing Israel. That's what they do. That's what they have done. But he was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass, speaking with a man's voice, hindered the madness of that false prophet. These priests that we are speaking of today, and that includes the Protestant ones too, they are wells without water, clouds they are carried with a tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. For when they speak great swelling words of vanity, they lure. Who do they lure? The unsuspecting and the weak. Through the lust of the flesh, through much wantonness, those who were clean escaped from, they turned back. This is another mistranslation here. It says from them who live. But anastrepho, 390 in the Greek says, they to overturn and turn back in error. So these people who were clean escaped the judgment, now they turn around and go back to this horrible error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are the servants of corruption. Destruction is the correct word. Pathora, 5356 in Strong's Concordance. Corruption, destruction. For of whom a man is overcome, or be inferior, the same is he brought to enslavement, bondage. And this is exactly what the Catholic Church did. They put everyone in bondage and subjection unto them. Not only did they, so did the others, so did the Protestants, and so did the Muslims. For if they, after they have escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Messiah and Savior, Yehoshua Messiah, they are again entangled therein and overcome, then their latter end is worse than their beginning. For it had been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than, after they have known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. But as it happened, unto them according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow that was washed to her wallowing in the mire. And notice how Paul uses the example of two unclean animals. Peter uses the example of two unclean animals, which are in reference to the Gentiles. So, to those people who knew that these Catholic priests were doing these vile and evil things to the children, and then you continued to send your children to be subjected to such things, you are the same as those Catholic priests. You are a partaker, a participant in their crimes. There are not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not millions, but over 1 billion who make this happen, who are participants of these crimes against our Father in heaven and against his holy word. Remember this. There were only 8 people that escaped the old world. That is how uncompromising our Father in heaven is.